What would you do if you discovered that the person you walk past every single day without a second glance was hiding an extraordinary secret? Marcus Chen thought he knew everyone worth knowing at Pinnacle Global Industries. After all, as CEO of one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech companies, his world revolved around board meetings, investor calls, and strategic partnerships. But sometimes the most remarkable people are hiding in plain sight, and Marcus was about to learn this lesson in the most unexpected way possible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Chen stepped out of the executive elevator on the 35th floor of the Sterling Tower at exactly 6:47 a.m., just as he had every weekday for the past 4 years. The polished marble floors gleamed under the morning light, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the familiar scent of industrial-strength cleaning products lingered in the air. Everything was pristine, organized, perfect, exactly how Marcus liked his world to be. As he strode toward his corner office, briefcase in hand and already mentally rehearsing his presentation for the morning's acquisition meeting, he barely registered the figure mopping near the reception area. The janitor was always there at this hour, a quiet presence that had become as much a part of the morning routine as his double espresso and review of overnight emails from their Singapore office. "Morning," Marcus muttered without looking up from his phone, the same perfunctory greeting he'd given for years. "Good morning, Mr. Chen," came the reply in accented English. Marcus paused mid-stride, something about the response catching his attention, though he couldn't quite place what. He glanced back briefly at the janitor, a man in his 50s with weathered hands and graying hair beneath a worn baseball cap, then continued to his office. He had more pressing matters to consider than small talk with the cleaning staff. The janitor's name was Roberto Martinez, though Marcus had never bothered to learn it. Roberto had been working the night shift at Pinnacle Global for nearly 6 years, arriving each evening at 10 p.m. and finishing his rounds by 7 a.m. In all that time, he had been essentially invisible to the executives and employees who populated the gleaming offices during daylight hours. He was simply part of the building's infrastructure, as overlooked as the ventilation system or the fiber optic cables running through the walls. But Roberto saw everything. He had watched Marcus build Pinnacle Global from a scrappy startup occupying 2 floors to a major player requiring the entire top 10 floors of the Sterling Tower. He had observed late-night strategy sessions through glass conference room walls, seen the stress lines deepen around Marcus's eyes during the company's near-bankruptcy scare 3 years ago, and witnessed the celebration when their revolutionary translation software had landed its first Fortune 500 client. Roberto understood more than anyone realized, not just about the company's operations, which he had pieced together from overheard conversations and documents left on desks, but about the fundamental challenges facing a business trying to expand globally. You see, Roberto Martinez was not just a janitor who happened to speak Spanish. He was a man who had spent the first 35 years of his life traveling the world, collecting languages like other people collected stamps. Born in El Paso to a Mexican father and Irish-American mother, Roberto had grown up truly bilingual, switching seamlessly between Spanish and English depending on which grandparent was visiting. His facility with languages had caught the attention of his high school guidance counselor, who encouraged him to study linguistics at the University of Texas. But Roberto's path had taken a different turn when his father's construction business failed, leaving the family in financial ruin. Instead of college, Roberto had joined the Merchant Marine at 18, spending the next decade and a half sailing to ports across 6 continents. In Marseille, he had picked up French from dockworkers and cafe owners. During a 3-month stint in Hamburg, he had absorbed German with the same natural ease that had made English and Spanish feel like extensions of his own thoughts. A year-long assignment en routes through Southeast Asia had added Mandarin, Thai, and Vietnamese to his repertoire. Portuguese had come during countless stops in Brazilian ports, while Italian had emerged from relationships with crew members from Naples and Rome. Even Arabic had found its way into his linguistic arsenal during runs through North African ports, where knowing the local language meant the difference between fair prices and tourist prices, between genuine friendships and surface-level transactions. But life, as Roberto had learned, rarely follows the path you expect. A back injury sustained during a storm off the coast of Portugal had ended his seafaring career at 36. With no formal education beyond high school and a body that could no longer handle the physical demands of maritime work, Roberto had found himself starting over in Chicago, where his sister Maria had settled years earlier. The transition from seeing the world to cleaning office buildings had been jarring, but Roberto had adapted. He had always been a survivor, someone who could find opportunity where others saw only obstacles. The night shift suited him. Fewer people meant fewer questions about his background, fewer awkward explanations about how a man with his linguistic abilities had ended up pushing a mop. Over the years, Roberto had become a master of invisibility. He moved through the offices like a ghost, completing his work efficiently while the building's daytime inhabitants remained blissfully unaware of his presence. He learned their routines, their habits, their languages of choice, when they thought no one was listening. Marcus Chen, for instance, often took calls with their Taiwanese manufacturing partners in Mandarin, not realizing that the janitor cleaning nearby understood every word of his frustration with production delays. Jennifer Walsh, the head of European expansion, frequently vented in French to her assistant about the challenges of breaking into the German market, unaware that Roberto comprehended her complaints about cultural barriers and linguistic nuances that were slowing their progress. The irony was not lost on Roberto. Here was a company struggling to communicate effectively with international clients and partners, spending millions on translation software and consulting fees, while a man who could speak 9 languages fluently worked unnoticed in their midst every night. He had witnessed Marcus's growing frustration with their European expansion efforts. Just last week, Roberto had observed a heated video conference where a potential client in Berlin had ended negotiations early, clearly frustrated by miscommunications and cultural misunderstandings that the translation software couldn't bridge. Marcus had spent the next hour pacing his office, muttering in English and Mandarin about the company's inability to connect authentically with international markets. Roberto could have solved that problem with a 30-minute conversation, but the invisible man remained invisible. The morning of the incident that would change everything, Roberto was finishing his usual routine when he overheard Marcus on a phone call that would prove to be a catalyst. The CEO was speaking in rapid, frustrated Mandarin to someone in their Hong Kong office, clearly agitated about a deal that was falling apart due to cultural misunderstandings and communication failures. As Roberto emptied the trash can near Marcus's desk, he found himself unconsciously nodding along with the conversation, understanding not just the words but the subtle implications and cultural references that were creating the breakdown. For a moment, he forgot where he was, forgot his role, forgot the invisible barrier that separated him from the executive making the call. "The problem isn't just translation," Roberto said quietly in perfect Mandarin, responding to a point Marcus had just made about linguistic nuances. "It's understanding the concept of face and relationship building in Chinese business culture." The words hung in the air for a moment before Marcus slowly turned around, his phone still pressed to his ear, eyes wide with shock as he stared at the janitor who had just addressed him in flawless Mandarin, and who clearly understood the intricate details of international business negotiations. That moment of recognition, of the invisible suddenly becoming visible, was about to transform everything for both men. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus Chen's hand trembled slightly as he lowered his phone, the voice of his Hong Kong partner still chattering through the speaker about missed deadlines and cultural barriers. The CEO's eyes remained fixed on Roberto, who had frozen mid-motion while emptying the wastebasket, suddenly realizing the magnitude of what had just happened. "I'm sorry," Roberto said quickly in English, his accent more pronounced now under stress. "I didn't mean to interrupt your call, Mr. Chen. I should get back to—" "Wait." Marcus held up his hand, his voice barely above a whisper. He spoke a few rapid words in Mandarin to his colleague, explaining he'd call back, then hung up. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Did you understand everything I was saying?" Roberto straightened slowly, his weathered hands still gripping the handles of the cleaning cart. In that moment, he faced a choice that would alter the trajectory of both their lives. He could deflect, make excuses, retreat back into the safety of invisibility, or he could step into the light for the first time in 6 years. "Yes, sir," Roberto said simply. "I understood." Marcus sank into his leather chair, studying the man he had walked past thousands of times without truly seeing. How much of it? The call, I mean. All of it. Roberto's voice grew steadier as he made his decision. You were discussing the Zhang Industries contract. Your partner, Mr. Wong, is frustrated because the negotiations have stalled. The issue isn't really about the technical specifications of your translation software. It's about the relationship dynamics. Mr. Zhang feels that your team doesn't understand the importance of guanxi in Chinese business culture. Marcus's jaw dropped. Guanxi, the complex web of relationships and mutual obligations that formed the backbone of Chinese business, was exactly what his expensive consultants had been trying to explain for months. Yet here was his janitor, articulating the concept with more clarity than any of the high-priced experts. How do you know about guanxi? Marcus asked, his mind racing to process this impossible situation. I spent 3 years sailing routes through Asia, Roberto explained, setting down his cleaning supplies and standing straighter. Shanghai, Hong Kong, Taipei, Singapore. You learn quickly that business in China isn't just about contracts and specifications. It's about trust, respect, and long-term relationships. Mr. Zhang isn't just buying software. He's investing in a partnership, but your current approach treats him like any other client. Marcus stared at Roberto as if seeing him for the first time. You've been here 6 years. 6 years, and why didn't you ever say anything? A sad smile crossed Roberto's face. When would I have said something, Mr. Chen? And to whom? I am the night janitor. I empty trash cans and mop floors. Who would believe that I understand international business negotiations? The weight of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Roberto was right. The corporate hierarchy had rendered him invisible, his insights dismissed before they could even be heard. How many other brilliant minds were hiding in plain sight, overlooked simply because of their job titles or circumstances? What languages do you speak? Marcus asked, his voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and growing amazement. Roberto hesitated for a moment, then began listing them off. Spanish and English natively, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Mandarin, Thai, Vietnamese, and Arabic. Some better than others, but all fluently enough for business conversations. 9 languages. Marcus repeated the number as if trying to make sense of it. You speak 9 languages, and you're working as a janitor in my building. Life doesn't always go according to plan, Mr. Chen, Roberto said with quiet dignity. I needed work, and this job pays the bills. There's no shame in honest work. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, recognizing the unintended condescension in his words. I didn't mean, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. It's just that. He gestured helplessly at his desk, covered with reports about their struggling international expansion. Do you have any idea what this company has been going through trying to break into global markets? Roberto glanced at the scattered documents, many of which he had seen discarded in various stages of completion over the months. Some idea, yes. I've observed the late-night meetings, the frustrated phone calls. The European expansion has been particularly challenging. Challenging is putting it mildly, Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. We've spent over $2 million on consultants, translators, and cultural advisors in the past year alone. Our German launch was a disaster. The French market won't return our calls. And don't even get me started on Italy. Roberto nodded thoughtfully. The German launch failed because your marketing materials were translated correctly, but culturally inappropriate. Germans value precision and detailed technical information, but your campaigns focused on emotional appeals and lifestyle branding. Very American approaches that don't resonate there. Marcus's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? I've spent considerable time in Hamburg and Bremen. German business culture prizes thoroughness, reliability, and technical excellence. Your software is superior to your competitors, but your presentation emphasized convenience and user-friendliness instead of robust functionality and security features. To German clients, that suggests your product might be superficial. Jesus, Marcus whispered. Our consultants charged us $50,000 to tell us that our, quote, messaging needed refinement. You just explained in 30 seconds what they couldn't figure out in 3 months. Roberto's expression remained humble. I had the advantage of observing your campaigns and hearing the client feedback. Plus, I understand both the language and the culture from experience, not just textbooks. Marcus leaned forward, his mind beginning to race with possibilities. What about France? Our attempts to enter that market have been complete failures. French business culture is all about relationships and intellectual discourse, Roberto explained. Your representatives have been treating meetings like American sales pitches, direct, focused on ROI, heavy on statistics. French clients want to engage in thoughtful conversation, to feel that you understand their unique market challenges and cultural values. They want to be convinced through dialogue, not presentation slides. And Italy? Roberto chuckled softly. Italians conduct business through personal connections and trust. Your team has been dealing with Italian companies like they're dealing with corporations, but in Italy, you're dealing with families, even in large businesses. Relationship building takes time, shared meals, genuine personal interest. Your representatives have been pushing for quick decisions in a culture that values patience and personal connection. With each explanation, Marcus felt another piece of a complex puzzle clicking into place. Every insight Roberto offered aligned perfectly with the feedback they had received from failed partnerships. But unlike the vague recommendations from their expensive consultants, Roberto's observations came with specific, actionable understanding. "This is incredible," Marcus said, shaking his head in amazement. "You've been here this whole time, watching us struggle with problems you could have helped solve." "It's not that simple, Mr. Chen," Roberto replied. "Knowledge isn't just about having information. It's about having the authority to share it, and the platform to be heard. I may understand these cultures, but I'm not a consultant with credentials and a suit. I'm a janitor with a high school diploma." The profound truth of Roberto's words settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. How many times had he dismissed ideas or insights because they came from someone he deemed unqualified? How often had his own prejudices and assumptions blinded him to valuable resources right under his nose? "Tell me about your background," Marcus said, settling back in his chair. "How does someone learn 9 languages?" Roberto glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that his shift was nearly over and the building would soon fill with employees beginning their workday. "It's a long story, Mr. Chen." "I have time," Marcus assured him. "In fact, I'm beginning to think this might be the most important conversation I've had in years." Roberto took a deep breath and began to share the story of his life, his multicultural childhood, his years at sea, the ports and people and languages that had shaped his understanding of the world. He spoke of storms weathered off the coast of Portugal, of business deals witnessed in Singapore harbor bars, of friendships forged in a dozen languages across 6 continents. As Roberto talked, Marcus found himself captivated not just by the man's linguistic abilities, but by his depth of real-world experience. This wasn't theoretical knowledge gained from textbooks or business school case studies. This was practical wisdom earned through decades of cross-cultural interaction, the kind of insight that no amount of money could purchase from consulting firms. "The injury that ended your maritime career," Marcus said when Roberto finished his story. "You said it happened off Portugal?" "A cargo shift during a storm," Roberto confirmed. 3 herniated discs. "The doctor said I could probably manage office work, but nothing requiring heavy lifting or long periods of physical activity. Maritime work was out of the question." "So you came to Chicago?" "My sister Maria was here. She helped me get on my feet, found me this job. It wasn't what I had planned for my life, but it was honest work, and it paid enough to get by." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. Finally he spoke. "Roberto, I want you to know that I'm ashamed." Roberto looked puzzled. "Ashamed, sir?" "I'm ashamed that I've walked past you for 6 years without ever really seeing you. I'm ashamed that I've been paying consultants enormous fees to solve problems you could have addressed on day one. But mostly, I'm ashamed that our company, a company built on the idea of breaking down communication barriers, has been guilty of the worst kind of communication failure, not recognizing the human resources we already had." The sincerity in Marcus's voice touched something deep in Roberto's chest. After years of invisibility, of being treated as part of the building's furniture, someone was finally seeing him as a person with value beyond his ability to clean floors and empty trash cans. "What happens now?" Roberto asked quietly. Marcus stood up, extending his hand toward Roberto. "Now I'd like to formally introduce myself. I'm Marcus Chen, CEO of Pinnacle Global Industries. And I think you and I need to have a much longer conversation about the future." Roberto looked at the outstretched hand, then up at Marcus's face, seeing something there he had never noticed before. Respect. Slowly, he reached out and shook Marcus's hand. "Roberto Martinez," he said. And yes, sir, I think we do. 3 hours later, the executive conference room on the 35th floor buzzed with an energy that Marcus Chen had never experienced before. Word had spread quickly through the upper management ranks about the CEO's unusual morning discovery, and now 8 of Pinnacle Global's senior executives sat around the polished oak table, waiting to meet the janitor who spoke 9 languages. Roberto Martinez entered the room, wearing the same uniform he had worn for 6 years, but something fundamental had changed. He walked with quiet confidence, no longer the invisible man who moved through shadows. Marcus had insisted that Roberto maintain his regular appearance for this meeting, not to humiliate him, but to drive home a point that needed to be made. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "I'd like you to meet Roberto Martinez. Roberto has been with our company for 6 years, and as of this morning, he's going to be helping us solve some problems that have been costing us millions." Sarah Williams, the head of marketing, looked skeptical. "Marcus, I don't understand. Is this some kind of team-building exercise?" "Roberto," Marcus said, ignoring the question, "would you mind greeting our European expansion team in their respective languages?" Roberto nodded and turned to face the group. "Bonjour, Madame Williams. J'espère que nous pourrons travailler ensemble pour résoudre les défis du marché français." His French was flawless, carrying the subtle Parisian accent he had picked up during his merchant marine days. Sarah's eyebrows shot up in surprise as Roberto continued, addressing Klaus Müller, their German operations manager. "Guten Morgen, Herr Müller. Ich freue mich darauf, Ihnen über die kulturellen Nuancen des deutschen Marktes zu sprechen." Klaus nearly dropped his coffee cup. Roberto's German wasn't just fluent, it carried the regional inflections of northern Germany, suggesting deep familiarity with the culture. Roberto then turned to Antonio Reeves, who handled their Italian partnerships. "Buongiorno, Signor Reeves. Spero che possiamo discutere di come migliorare le nostre relazioni commerciali in Italia attraverso una migliore comprensione culturale." The room fell silent. Antonio, who had struggled for months to build meaningful connections with Italian firms, stared at Roberto in amazement. "How is this possible?" Sarah whispered. Marcus smiled. "Roberto, why don't you tell them about the Zhang Industries contract?" For the next 20 minutes, Roberto outlined a comprehensive strategy for salvaging their most important Asian partnership. He explained the cultural missteps that had derailed negotiations, detailed the specific relationship-building protocols that Chinese business culture required, and proposed a 3-phase approach to rebuilding trust with Mr. Zhang. "The key," Roberto explained in perfect Mandarin before switching back to English, "is understanding that in Chinese business culture, you're not selling a product, you're proposing a marriage. Mr. Zhang needs to feel that Pinnacle Global respects his company's history, values their input, and sees them as partners rather than customers." Klaus leaned forward. "What about our German expansion? We launched 6 months ago and have barely secured 3 contracts." Roberto's expression grew thoughtful. "Your software is exceptional, technically superior to anything available in the German market. But your marketing emphasizes ease of use and quick implementation. German businesses don't want easy. They want robust, secure, and thoroughly tested. They want to know that your system has been stress-tested, that it complies with their data protection standards, and that it won't need frequent updates that might disrupt their operations." "Our consultants never told us that," Sarah said, her skepticism replaced by genuine interest. "Consultants often understand theory," Roberto replied diplomatically, "but I've worked alongside German engineers in Hamburg. I've seen how they approach technology decisions. They want detailed technical specifications, third-party security certifications, and case studies showing long-term reliability. Your current marketing materials focus on user experience, which matters in the American market, but German buyers want proof of engineering excellence." Antonio raised his hand. "And Italy, we've been trying to break into that market for 2 years." Roberto smiled. "Italy requires a completely different approach. Business there is deeply personal. You need to invest time in relationship building before anyone will seriously consider your product. Your representatives need to visit Italy, not just for presentations, but for meals, for genuine conversations about family and local culture. Italians buy from people they trust, and trust takes time to build." "We've been treating all European markets the same way," Sarah realized aloud. "Cookie-cutter presentations, standardized sales approaches. Each culture has its own business language," Roberto confirmed. France values intellectual discourse and wants to engage in philosophical discussions about innovation. Italy prioritizes personal relationships and trust. Germany demands technical precision and proven reliability. Spain appreciates formal respect and time to consider decisions carefully. One approach cannot fit all markets. Marcus watched his executives absorb Roberto's insights with growing excitement. This was exactly what Pinnacle Global had been missing. Not just linguistic translation, but cultural translation. "Roberto," Klaus said, "if you were designing our German market strategy from scratch, what would you do differently?" Roberto's eyes lit up as he outlined a comprehensive approach, partnering with respected German engineering firms for credibility, obtaining European security certifications before launch, creating detailed technical documentation in German engineering terminology, and establishing local support teams who understood German business culture. For each market, Roberto provided specific, actionable strategies that addressed not just language barriers, but the deeper cultural expectations that had been derailing their expansion efforts. As the meeting progressed, something remarkable happened. The executives began asking Roberto increasingly complex questions about international business practices, cultural nuances, and market-specific strategies. His responses were detailed, practical, and demonstrated a depth of real-world experience that none of their expensive consultants had possessed. "I have a question," Sarah said during a brief pause. "Roberto, you've been here 6 years. You've seen all our struggles, all our failed attempts to expand internationally. Why didn't you ever approach us before?" Roberto was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Ms. Williams, with respect, when would I have approached you? I work the night shift, cleaning offices after everyone has gone home. When our paths crossed, it was in passing, me emptying your trash can while you were focused on important work. The corporate structure doesn't create opportunities for janitors to offer business advice to executives." The weight of his words settled over the room. Marcus saw several of his executives exchange uncomfortable glances, recognizing their own role in maintaining barriers that prevented valuable insights from reaching decision-makers. "That changes today," Marcus announced firmly. "Roberto, I'm offering you a position as Director of International Cultural Affairs. Your job will be to help us navigate the cultural complexities of global expansion, work directly with our international teams, and ensure that we approach each market with appropriate cultural understanding." Roberto stared at Marcus, momentarily speechless. "Mr. Chen, I don't have business credentials. No MBA, no." "You have something better," Marcus interrupted. "You have real-world experience and genuine cultural fluency. You understand these markets from the inside, not from textbooks or case studies. That's exactly what we need." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Roberto, would you be willing to travel to Germany with our team next month? We have a major presentation with Deutsche Technology, and after hearing your insights, I think we've been approaching them completely wrong. And I'd love your input on our French strategy," added Michelle Torres, their European Partnerships Manager. "We're meeting with 3 potential clients in Paris next quarter." Roberto looked around the room at faces that were now turned toward him with respect and genuine interest, the same faces that had looked through him for 6 years. The transformation was overwhelming. "There's one condition," Roberto said finally. "I'd like to complete my business degree. If I'm going to represent Pinnacle Global in international markets, I want to have the formal credentials to match my experience." "Done," Marcus said immediately. "Full tuition reimbursement, flexible schedule to accommodate classes. Whatever you need." 6 months later, Roberto Martinez stood in his new office on the 34th floor, reviewing contracts for Pinnacle Global's successful expansion into 12 new international markets. His desk held family photos, language dictionaries, and artifacts from his maritime travels. On the wall hung a simple plaque. "The most valuable insights often come from unexpected sources." Through his window, he could see the janitor working the night shift on the floor below. Roberto made a mental note to introduce himself tomorrow morning, to learn the man's name and story. After all, he had learned that extraordinary people can be found anywhere. You just have to be willing to see them. The executive conference room, meanwhile, had been transformed as well. Marcus had instituted monthly perspective meetings where employees from all levels of the company could share insights and observations. The maintenance staff, security guards, administrative assistants, and others who had previously been invisible now had a voice in company operations. Roberto's success had taught them all a profound lesson. Genius doesn't always come with the right credentials, and wisdom often speaks in unexpected voices. Sometimes, the person who can solve your biggest problems is the one you've been walking past without seeing every single day. The janitor who spoke 9 languages had not only transformed a company's fortunes, he had transformed their understanding of where value truly lies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.